So today we're looking at React and Next.js. So we'll just start with an introduction. We'll do a few things together in terms of coding, and then, but before then, let's quickly go through what we did last week. So let me open. So week 9. Uh, this is the final version again. So I've pushed this, and this source code is now on both the final one and the starter version is now on GitHub. So everything is there, so you can just go back and see how I implemented the edits and the delete operation or functions. So let me open this. Let me open the index. Let's view this with live server. Let me bring the window here. So I'll just talk through this so that we have to move very fast, right? We have just barely two Saturday or two classes actually to round up the bootcamp. So, and there's still things I want us to cover. So for this one, again, this is my book library application, and so the basic functionalities have been implemented in this final version. Again, if you go to GitHub, so week 9, I believe, yeah, week 9. So everything is here, both the final and the starter, right? So this is where we stopped last week. We did some demos using this jsdemo.html, and then we started working on the main.js file here. So, and we're able to implement the delete book operation or function of the UI. So yeah, so go back, pull this whole pull the whole folder. You have access to the final and the starter one. So in the final one, you can go through how all of that portions were implemented. For example, there is the save in storage, save to local storage. There is a function for get book from local storage. There is get all books from local storage. There is delete book from local storage. There is edit book in local storage. There is get local storage, and so on and so forth. So you can see different functions that have been implemented. So functions are basically blocks of code that you execute at once, and they return, or they may return or not return a value, right? Because you may have void functions as well. So yeah, this is the final source code. Go through it, study it, see how it was implemented. It will be better if you try to implement yours first, right? And then now come here to cross-check if what you've done is correct. And again, mine may not be not necessarily the only way to solve it, right? So you can code yours in a different way, but just a way to reference what you are doing. You can easily come here to check what has been implemented. So the basic functionality is, once again, once this page loads, if there is no book titles in the local storage, everything will be blank. But once you submit, so it's going to add this in the local storage. If you look at your local storage, I believe I'm using Firefox here. For Firefox, you can check storage. Is this storage now? Local storage. This, yeah. So you can see the list. What I just added now. Let me add something else again. Book title. So once I submit, you can see this list has been updated. So there are now two objects in this array: object 0, object 1. So object 1 is the last one I just added, book title. You can see the title, you can see the ID, and all that. So that's the uh, then of course you can edit. So once you click on this edit button, which is the assignment I gave to you. Once you click on this edit button, you can see it loads this book title. Let me refresh this again. Let me do. So now observe this. If I click on I want to edit this second entry here. If I click on this icon is going to change, meaning that I'm now in edit mode. So if I click on this, you can see the icon on this submit button is now an edit button, right? And then we have the book title loaded for us here. So we can do our editing. We can say this is the real title, or the actual, we're just editing title. So once I hit submit again, once I click edit, it's gonna update this content here, or this entry here. So you can see, so it has been edited. The icon has been changed back to a save button, and then you have your UI refreshed. So that is that. Go to storage again. So it's been updated here. All right, so that's what we talked about last week, and again the source code is online, so I will not have time to go through everything again to see how it is implemented. You have everything online already. All right, so today we're going to do something different or something new. So we're diving into the world of React and Next.js, into the world of frameworks, right? So now you will agree with me that when you are writing JavaScript to develop applications, you write a lot of boilerplate codes. For example, when we're doing all this, just to display, which we're still going to demo here today, just to, let's go back to our JavaScript. So just to write all this, to dynamically create all this in the front end, we needed to create a div. We needed to add the div. We needed to add a class to a class list. We needed to create an attribute here. We needed to set the node. We needed to create inner HTML. Then we needed to, what else again? Append to child and all that. So just to do something simple as displaying a component, or as displaying a tag on your browser. Look at all the code you need to write, right? So now this is what led to the advent of frameworks. So frameworks, React and Next.js, and some other frameworks, right? In fact, React is not really a framework, it's a library, but this has given birth to full-fledged frameworks like Next.js and some other frameworks out there. So instead of writing all those boilerplate codes just to do one simple thing, frameworks enable you to do the same thing with less coding, with less code. Isn't that beautiful, right? And frameworks, because they are developed by a community of people, they've introduced best practices, because when you're writing your own solo code by yourself, you may not really be following the best practices in the industry, but using a framework, you are sure that those best practices have been implemented. Basic features have been implemented for you, which you don't need to worry about, and all that. So it makes development really, really beautiful and simple. So that is what we want to look at today. And the framework we'll be considering in this bootcamp is React. Others are, you must have heard of Angular, you must have heard of Vue, you must have heard of, in the world of Python, you must have heard of, what is this? Flask. Flask is one. And there's another popular one in Python. I'm blanking out now. I've forgotten. Anyways, what's that?
Django.
Django, yes, thank you. So Django is very popular as well. In the world of Java, you have Spring or Spring Boot. In the world of .NET, you have ASP.NET and some other frameworks like that. So, but in the world of JavaScript, the popular ones are really Next.js, React, which is a library actually, but people just call it framework. It's actually a library. It's not a complete framework. Then we have Next.js, which is a complete framework. You have Angular, like I mentioned. You have Vue. You have Remix. Remix is another popular production ready Remix.js. Yeah, Remix Run. So, which is in another popular framework that can help you write production grade applications. In fact, the makers of React also even recommend Next.js and React.dev. React.dev. So they recommend, they say if you want to build production grade, production ready applications, is somewhere they recommend using Next.js. And yes, look at this. See, go full stack with framework. So it says React is a library, like I mentioned. It lets you put components together, but it doesn't prescribe how to do routing and data fetching. So technically, they say it is unopinionated. So it allows, we'll still talk about that today. So it gives you the freedom to do whatever you want to do. So it doesn't prescribe different aspects of web development for you. All React does is enables you to create components on or user interfaces or user interface components on your browser. How you want to do fetching of data, how you want to do routing, how you want to do integrations, how you want to do all that is up to you. So React is unopinionated. Whereas some other frameworks are opinionated, meaning that this is what we believe you should do, and these are the things we've built into this platform to enable you to do things we believe is right for you, right? So Spring Framework, for example, consider Spring Boot, ASP.NET. So these are opinionated frameworks. They've handled so many things for you so that you don't have to build things from scratch. But React is just a library that enables you to build front-end components for your web applications. You can see this sentence. It says to build an entire app with React, we recommend full stack React frameworks like what? Next.js and Remix. Remix is a newer version. Well, we can say Remix is also built on React and as well Next.js. So the goal of these two frameworks is to really build production ready, production grade applications, building on server side components like how your pages are rendered on the browser. Are they rendered on the server? Are they rendered on the client and all that? So it's like the world is going back to the days of PHP again, the days of PHP when you write your code in the back end, everything is handled on the server side, your HTML is rendered on the server side, and then it gets sent to the browser to be displayed. So it's like the world is, I was reading an article recently, and it's like the world is going back to the days of PHP. So even JavaScript frameworks now are beginning to realize the importance of rendering your HTML on the back end before bringing them or sending them to the front end. So these are some of the things we'll be talking about today. Understanding frameworks. So React. So what are we going to cover? Let's see how far we can go today. So we're going to talk about React and Next.js. We're talking about user interfaces. We'll also talk about how you update UI with JavaScript. So we'll build a simple JavaScript application, which will now introduce us to using a framework, right? And that, I believe that will give us a better understanding of all this framework world that we're living in right now, because they are also based on the basic JavaScript we know of. So That's why we needed to treat JavaScript first before doing this. So we need the knowledge of JavaScript for us to be able to do work on React on frameworks, on JavaScript frameworks. So this tutorial is based on React Foundation course on Next.js.org. I figured, you know, what where is the perfect excuse me, what is the perfect source of or what is the best tutorial for us to use if not from the makers of the platform itself. So we're just going to go over it and see how they implemented basic user interfaces using JavaScript, and then using React, and then migrating it to a Next.js application. So we're talking about displaying data with props. We'll talk about migrating from React to Next.js, and then installing Next.js. Then we'll also talk about server and client components, which I've touched on briefly. So Next.js is a flexible React framework. Again, everything is based on React, right? So whatever you are writing on Next.js is actually a React component. Is based on React framework itself. So it gives you the building blocks for creating full stack web applications. So React doesn't give you that. Like we just saw now, it's just a library. But Next.js gives you the building block for creating web application. So what are those building blocks? For example, user interfaces. So how users will consume and interact with your application is all up to you. React will not tell you what to use, how to build the user interface, whether to use a templating engine or not, even though it has its own JSX, the extension of, it's like you're writing pure HTML within JavaScript, right? And then, routing is something you need to consider when building an application. Data fetching, like I mentioned already. Rendering, whether you want to render static websites on the front end or on the back end, or you want to make it dynamic. Integrations, what third-party applications do you want to integrate? React is unopinionated, will not tell you how to do all this, right? How about the infrastructure? Where do you want to deploy your app or store or run your application? Are you going to use a serverless, a serverless facility or infrastructure, or a content delivery network, CDN, and so on and so forth. You have about performance as well. React is fast, but there are faster frameworks. Like Next.js is very fast because of the server side rendering that I just mentioned. Remix is also in fact, I learned that Remix is even faster than Next.js. So yeah, all these things are the things you need to think about when building a JavaScript application, right? About scalability, about developer experience, and all that. So React as a library will not give you will not tell you what to do, but that's where Next.js now comes in. Again, what is React? React is a JavaScript library for building interactive user interfaces. That's what it does. It's just to build UIs for your user to be able to interact with them, right? So by user interface, we mean the elements that the users can see or what they can interact with on the screen. And you can see this diagram, for example. That logo is a user interface. The nav bar, the sidebar, the posts. So these are different components within the client or within the browser that you can use React to build. So all this can represent separate components which are reusable, right? So if you navigate to another screen, your logo should still be there. Your nav bar should still be there. Maybe the sidebar should still be there. Then the posts could change. When you navigate to another screen, you want to see a new post or you want to read comments and all that. So React enables you to build components using JavaScript. So again, what does it offer? You can see by library we mean that React provides helpful functions or API to build your UI, but it leaves it up to the developer where to use those functions in the application. Again, it gives you the freedom to operate how you want or however you want, as you are developing your web application, right? So we see it also means, however, that building a complete React application from ground up requires some effort. So because it is unopinionated, you know, all those basic building blocks that we've looked at have not been built into the framework, then you have to now put in effort to gather all that, routing, fetching data, integrations with CDN and all that. You have to put in more effort to put all those together to have a functional React application. In fact, if you're not even careful and you don't know about server-side rendering, and you go ahead to build a full-fledged React application so beautiful and you want to take it to market, you're going to run into troubles because there's something called search engine optimization, right? So if you let me open search engine optimization, SEO. So SEO, if you use React to build a user facing application or an application that users will interact with, and you are happy, you are ready, you want to launch your application and all that, and then your application is not search engine optimized. So one reason why React is recommending Next.js or Remix is that it renders your HTML from the back end, it serves the content to the front end. So at the end of the day, if you display your React.js application, and you try to view the source, you will not see the HTML in the source, and that is what the your search engine needs to crawl to optimize your page, right? So React on its own is not good for search engine optimization, SEO. Right? So React on its own is not, including search engine, is a self. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about search engine optimization, which I believe some of us know about. So you cannot use React to build a full application with the hopes that it's going to, of course, it's going to render, but how about when you take it to market? How about when users start interacting with it? How about when you want to make money, right? And you want Google to crawl your website so as to send users to your website? It becomes challenging. In fact, recently, somebody even reached out to me concerning this same problem, right? They've built the business based on React, but they failed to really consider SEO, right? So, and of course, they now need to start re-architecting the project just to make sure that the business or the website is SEO friendly. So, yeah, that's so. Start thinking about the market when you're building your products. Now, I'm talking about all this because we're not just learning React or learning tutorials. So I want us to really understand why we are doing all this, because at some point you're going to start building products that users will use. You're going to start building products that a lot of people are going to come online to use. So I'm introducing all these concepts so that you know that there's a lot involved in building real life applications. So not just coding and making your UI beautiful. Behind all the beauty of your UI, you want to make your website functional. You also want to make money, right? If you're a business owner, if you are a developer, you have a contract from a business owner, you want to make sure you're giving them the best. So take note of that. Again, so React alone will not give you all the building blocks you need for your web application. So what else do you need? So again, as a developer, you need to start configuring tools by yourself, reinventing the solutions. You don't want to do all that. So that's why React as a platform also recommends Next.js or Remix. So what is this Next.js? What is Next.js? So Next.js is a React framework that gives you building blocks to create web applications. It is still based on Next.js, whatever everything you are doing in it is still based on React rather. So everything you are doing on Next.js is every function you write on Next.js is a valid React function, right? So take note of that. So by framework, we mean Next.js handles the tooling and the configuration needed for React and provides additional structure, features, and optimization. For example, how will the users look at this section in the middle? You can see UI with React. You can see rendering. You can see routing. You can see data fetching, integrations, and some of those things we mentioned a few slides back. So Next.js builds all this into the platform so that you have a production grade the word production here means that something that you can release to the market that customers can start interacting with. So in the world of software engineering, during development, right, you don't just whatever you are working on currently during development, you don't release that to the market, right? Because you are still testing, it is buggy and all that. So it goes through series of stages: development, testing. It could be system integration testing. It could now be user acceptance testing, and then it moves on to uh, production. Maybe after user acceptance testing, you can now say, oh, all features are correct, are perfect, and we can move it to production. So that's the word production I'm using here. Production meaning that your application has passed through all the stages of testing. It is now ready to be used by the users, by the end users, who, because you don't want the end users to come to your platform and they are seeing error, bugs here and there, the features are not working fine. So all those should have been handled before it gets to the customer who is using your application on the browser. So you use React, you use Next.js to make sure that all those features have been ready, and your users or the end users can start interacting with your application. Of course, you still need to go through testing and all that, which is normal. So rendering user interfaces. So to understand how React works, we first need a basic understanding of how browsers interpret code. We've touched on this. In fact, we've dealt with this in our last class where we talked about document object model. So that's what this slide, or all the slides from this point forward, we'll be talking about. So when a user visits a web page, the server returns an HTML file to the browser that may look like what we are seeing here. Look at this diagram. So on the left hand side, we have the HTML. On the right hand side is how that HTML is structured. So you can see the document object model. It's like a tree of objects, speaking in JavaScript parlance now. So it's like a tree of objects. We can see the top level component is the HTML according to the markup we have on the left hand side. Then down we have the body, and below the body we have a div tag. Now inside the div we have h1ul, you can see, and then the button. Then inside the h1 tag we have a text component, right, which is not really shown as a node, but when you are using JavaScript to create it, it's actually a text node on its own. And then inside I'm talking about this text theme here is actually a text node inside the h1 tag. And then within the UL, we have the L1, we have the all the LIs, right? All the list items. So this is how the browser renders or converts your HTML to something that JavaScript can interact with. So it is called the document object model. So we see that the browser then renders the HTML and constructs the DOM, like I said. So after rendering the HTML, rendering here means after creating or displaying the HTML, behind the scene, what really happens is that there is an object, there is a tree of document object created, that your JavaScript can now interact with. So what is DOM again? The DOM is an object representation of the HTML elements. You can see. So all those HTML elements we saw earlier on, look at the output, look at the user interface. You can see meet the engineers, A. Lovelace, A. G. Hopper, M. Hamilton. So the HTML markup produces what we are seeing, but behind the scene there's a document object that has been arranged as we are seeing here on the left hand side. There's a HTML, there's a body, there's the div which now produces which houses all these other elements, and then the users can see it in the front end. So we can see that the DOM methods and JavaScript can be used to listen to user events. Remember what we did last week? We talked about event listeners. So you can use DOM and JavaScript to now listen to user event. For example, when a user clicks a button, when a user submits a form, when a user clicks a drop down or select an item in a drop down box. All these actions are handled by events. So events are being fired, and you can handle those events by combining JavaScript and DOM, to work together to help you handle all those events. Now we are introducing all this because this is the foundation of frameworks, right? By the time we're now working on frameworks, you discover that all those get element by ID, get selector that we did last week are really not necessary, because the library or the framework Next.js or the library React already takes care of all those things. You don't have to do get element by ID, add child elements. You don't have to do all that when you're working with frameworks. So this is what we're looking at today. So let's now see. Let's write our first, or before then, let's just write basic JavaScript, and then we're going to use that to talk more about Next.js. So let me close this out and then move to our. So we have, am I in week? Let me close this out. Come on. So week 10, let's go to week 10. Okay, I've created it already. So let's just do, actually, let me delete this one. I don't need it anymore here. So all this can go. So I have my basic. Let me do this. Basic HTML boilerplate. Let's do React Next.js intro. All right, so let's move on. Let's build something basic. Let's add a div, right? Let's just add a div with an ID. Oh no, not a class. With an ID of, again, everything we're doing here is based on the React Foundation course on Next.js. So I'm still going to share the link, and I think I have the link on the slide as well. So once I send out this slide, you can get the link, so you can just go there directly. So let's give it an ID of, let's say, app, right? So we have that, and then we can create, since we're dealing with JavaScript, let's add a script tag at the bottom. Let's do inside, let's make it a type of JavaScript, type text / JavaScript, right? So inside this script, we can now do get element by ID. Remember how so here is the In fact, let me just put something here. Let me put a text here. Demo text. So let's see the output of this. Open in live server. So let me bring this closer to us, or to this screen rather. So you can see our demo text, right? So this demo text is just a text node or text component added to a div. Let me bring this here. So this can go. So you can see demo text here. So now what we're trying to do is that we want to see how to, which is what we've done before, but we want to use this as a build up to how frameworks really work. So now we're having demo text as text here, but let me remove this. I really do not need this text, but I need a reference to this particular element, right? I need a reference to this particular element. How do we do that? In JavaScript, we do get element by ID. Hope we still remember that. So const, I can name it app, right? Equals document dot get element by ID. So already this element has an ID of what? Of name app, right? So I can put in my app here as. So here we've gotten, what we've done basically is just to get or have a reference to this particular element here. And this is basically what Java, in fact, if you open any React application and you view the source, in the index.html, you will see a div element that has an ID of app. So it is in this whole element that your user interface appears. So the framework inflates or embeds the entire application dynamically. Remember dynamic, how you render or how you can render your components dynamically. So the framework comes to this ID and renders the whole UI here dynamically. So that's what we're trying to do here. So inside our JavaScript now, let's create, we want to embed, we want to put something in between this tag, this opening and closing tags. We want to put something there. We want to put a header element there. Remember we said you can use JavaScript with the DOM API to create elements as well, right? So we can say const, let's call it header equals document dot create element. Remember last week, the same thing we're doing here. So we want to create an h1 tag. So we want to create an h1 tag and then figure out how to embed this h1 tag into this simple div element here. So with that done, let's add a text component to our h1 tag. When I say text equals whatever, welcome to JavaScript and React framework, right? That is a text we want to embed. So what else do we need? So we need to create a node. Remember I mentioned that any text that appears on your browser is actually a node as a child of that particular element. So if you have a paragraph tag with some paragraphs, in the world of JavaScript, JavaScript sees that text as nodes or as a node, right? So let's create a node header. Let's call it header content equals document dot create element. We need to create a node, create text node rather, or not element, create text node. So put in your text node here. So look at line 17. Line 17 is just normal JavaScript assignment or assignment operation. We created a variable called text and we're assigning this string to it. Simple, right? But what we're now doing in line 18 is we're creating a text node because JavaScript sees every text as an element, right? As a DOM element. So you must create a text node and now assign that text node to a parent element, right? So that's what we're trying to do. So in line 18, we've created a text node of this particular text. And then what we can now do is to append, see, header, we can now say header dot append child. Remember append child that we used last week? That means we're adding a child to a parent, meaning that header is now a parent and the header content is now the child. So we can say header content, right? So now we've appended the header content into the header, but it's still not displaying here yet. Remember what we have here on the UI is this div. This div is empty. But we've made reference to this div by this app variable. So we can now say app.append child. So we want to now append to the app ID, append child again. So something should appear on the front end now. So header ID, so refresh. So let's see what's, I hope this is not, so let's remove all this because JavaScript is, now let's check this, let's check the console. You see some bugs now. So JavaScript is having, you can see this warning sign. It shows that there's a bug in our code and I know where that's coming from. The resource from this was blocked due to MIME tab mismatch. So let's see, let's remove all this first. So const header content, what are we doing at that level? So here we are creating a variable. We are just creating a simple variable here using a keyword called const. Again, if you just joined us, right? All those videos are available on YouTube where we talked about creating variables, assigning variables to assigning values to your variable. So now look at, so yeah, I can see that. So that was the error that was the error in our code or the bug. So we can see this text is an H1 element. Now look at all the source code we needed to type. Let me bring everything together. Look at this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now 6 lines of code for us to produce just this one line, one line of HTML at the front. In fact, if you view the source, let's view, now we'll see what happens now. Let's view source, view page source. Now look at, now all these ones were inserted by the, what is it? Injected by live server. Look at injected by live server. So ignore this part. Let me bring this out. Now ignore this script from line 21 down to the end. It was injected by live server. So this is what live server uses to refresh your page. But look at lines 10 to 20, the script that we wrote, right? Can anybody discover something? Something is off here? Can somebody share with us? From lines 10 to line 20, let's just focus on, let me give you a hint. The hint is on line 11. Can somebody tell us what's going on? Again, look at this. This is the UI we just rendered, right? Welcome to JavaScript and React framework. On a normal day, when you view the source of your HTML displays all the markups. The source should give you all the markup and everything, right? Look at the div and everything. So the source should also contain the value or this text content on a normal day. But look at what is happening here. Can you see? It is empty. So this is exactly how React behaves. If you view it, because it's a single page application, so if you view a React application, you will see a div with an ID of app. So this is what is uses to now inflate. So when you view the source, you will not see the original markup in your from the HTML, because JavaScript is dynamically injecting the content here. Yes, it's dynamically replaced. It's dynamically placed. So because of this singular feature of JavaScript or React, search engine will not crawl this particular. Even if it crawls, it won't see anything to what is the word now? To index, right? So because they can't imagine having a full page, a whole e-commerce website, and you view the source, you can't see the source. You can't see all the markups. So what will the search engine index? So, and that is the issue that Next.js and the other frameworks like Remix is trying to solve. So they discovered that if we render this HTML, let's inspect. In our inspect box, let's bring this out again. So in our inspect, we can see the markup. Inspect. Can you see? So in our inspect, you can see div ID app. Inside there's an h1 tag. But in our view source, we can't see it. Let me go to view page source again. So in our view source, the h1 tag is not appearing. It's not. So it is because it's dynamically rendered. So JavaScript will not show the view source. But of course, as a developer, you know that there's an h1 tag and everything that should appear there. So Next.js now solves this problem by bringing this whole markup to this place. So it renders the markup on the server and then brings the whole markup to the browser, so that when you view source, you can still view all the markups. So search engine can now crawl and then index the content of your website. So this is very critical to learning React and then Next.js. Take note of that. So let's go back again. Let's come back to here. All right. So we can see that is happening. We're dynamically rendering something from within JavaScript to what? To our HTML. So what is HTML versus DOM? So if you look at the DOM elements inside your browser developer tool, just like as we did now, you notice that the DOM includes the h1 element. Inside the browser tool, we saw the h1, right? But if you view source, the h1 is not there. The DOM of the page is different from the source code. Or in other words, we see that the original HTML file you created is different from the source code. So this is because the HTML represents the initial page content, whereas the DOM represents the updated page content, which was changed by the JavaScript code you wrote. So dynamically, JavaScript is injecting something into this portion of the code, right? Remember when we used inner HTML, assuming we wanted to introduce like some HTML tags here, like paragraph tag, right? Paragraph tag, paragraph tag. Let's close this. So who can tell us what are we going to do? You can see how paragraph is showing here. It is because we are not using the right, so we have to use inner HTML in that case, just as we did last week, right? So, but I just wanted to mention that this is just a text component, and we're doing create text node. So we could have just done maybe header content.inner HTML. We assign all that to it to display in the front. So of course, in that case, it will now show as a paragraph tag, and then remove, of course, you won't see P and this P rendered in the browser. So so let's move forward. We are building up to how frameworks run. In fact, if you see, somebody's saying the quotation mark should be inside the P tag. Which quotation mark is that? Let me redo this. Is there a quotation mark somewhere? Okay. So yeah, I get what you mean, but yeah, so the person is saying that we should do this, right? Of which this will not even work. So remember, you are not in HTML. At this point, you are inside JavaScript. Take note. You are inside JavaScript. See, I'm already seeing 2 errors in my look at let me close all this. Console. Let's go to console. See, uncut syntax error, expected expression, got this. So JavaScript is telling us something is wrong here. What is this P tag? I don't understand this P. Is this HTML? Is this? So yeah, so I get what you mean. Assuming we're inside HTML, let me copy this out. Assuming we're here, yeah, this is, of course, we don't even need the quotation here, right? This is normal paragraph tag, and we don't even need this one here. It's going to be rendered as well. So you can see how it is rendered here. But inside this script tag, we are not inside this place. We are not in HTML. I like the expression they use. They say here you are inside JavaScript land. See, this is JavaScript land inside HTML land, right? Or JavaScript world inside HTML world. So everything we are doing here is not HTML. Be careful. Everything we are doing here is JavaScript, not HTML. But everything we are doing outside these script tags, outside here, they are pure, they are all HTML. Just like I cannot come here, let me copy this line 15 and bring it here and paste. See, you can see it's going to be rendered in the front end for me. Look at, it's rendering it because the HTML rendering engine cannot interpret this as HTML. It's just going to interpret this as text. So it's going to display whatever text you give to it in the front end. So take note. So at line 14, I am inside HTML world or inside HTML land. So it only understands HTML markups. But from line 18 to 23, I'm now inside JavaScript land. It only understands JavaScript markup. But what I did here earlier was to dynamically create a paragraph tag. Remember, we did something like this in our last class. So I want to dynamically create a paragraph tag with text. Are you getting me? See, header content is this. I've created it. In fact, we can even let's do this. Let's do equals inner content. Let me copy this out. Append child header content. Let's do header dot inner HTML equals text. Yeah, so I don't need this anymore. So let me show header. Okay, so yeah, you can see. Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, comment line 2023. Yeah, thanks. So you can now see what I did. So this is now a paragraph tag, right? Although I believe it should not be paragraph inside. Let's see. Let's view the source. Let's view the source here. So body div. So look at. You can see the paragraph. This is now paragraph in element inside H1. So I was trying to demo inner HTML versus just creating text node. So although welcome.javascript framework is just a text, but it's now in between a paragraph tag inside H1. Look at. So because we've created an element called H1 as header, right? So now we're now doing the inner HTML of header. I mean, all children inside this header should either whether they are HTML tags or just normal text, put them as children inside the header tag, and then append the header tag to our app, which is our ID on the user interface. So dynamically, we've appended or we've loaded this to the front end. So we can see that you can even see the stress involved in building or writing using HTML DOM and all that to write React, to write a web application. So that's what framework now helps you to take care of. So how do we introduce React to what we are doing? So how do we take care of this? How do we reduce all this boilerplate code using get element by ID and all that? So we're going to start introducing React into what we have here. First and foremost, we're not going to do the normal setting up of React like running npm install and all that. We can just do a CDN version of React and add that to this, incrementally build up to installing React using Node.js, using Node Package Manager, npm. So what I'm going to do now is to introduce React to this place. I'm just going to copy the CDN for React and React DOM. Let me copy that and paste. We are gradually introducing React into this same markup now. So inside, again, when you're putting your script tag, let's put this in the header section. So look at that line 8 and 9. Line 8 and 9. So you can see look at react.development.js, meaning there's just a development version of it, which is not production. That doesn't matter since we're also developing. Then there's React, but there's React DOM. React is the main framework. Then React DOM is the part of the framework that helps you to interact with HTML DOM. So you can see all these get element by ID, create elements, inner HTML and all that, which comes from JavaScript DOM. This will help us to take care of that, right? Again, I'm doing all this to sort of introduce us to the world of frameworks. Ideally, when you want to build a React framework, you don't start like this at all. I mean, when you want to build a React application, you don't start this way. You use create React app and all that. The whole boilerplate code is generated for you, and you start writing your code. But it is good for us to really have an understanding of how all that happens, right? So that's what we are doing in this class. So take note. For those who are experienced with React or Next.js, you might be wondering, why are we doing all this? We are doing all this to have a background introduction to how to really build React, or what happens behind the scene when React or when a React application is built. So that's what we are doing. Because if you Google how to install React on Next.js, what they will give to you is normal, you know, in fact, let me show you something so that I understand what I'm trying to say. And just do install React installation, right? So what you see is, I'm looking for, where is it? Yeah, so create next app latest. This is for Next.js. Well, yeah, I'm just trying to let you know. Okay, this is for Remix. Remember, I said they encourage, you know, people to use Next and Remix to build. Gatsby is another framework to build full applications. Anyways, if I even for Next.js, once you do this, it's going to install all the boilerplate code, the folder structure, everything you need. But we are doing this today just to have an understanding of how React works behind the scene. How does all those DOM that we learned last week, how does it translate to the framework, you know, handling all those work for us? That's what we're doing today. Somebody saying, is there an application where we're meant to download before using React? No, you are not downloading any application. Well, okay, there are basic requirements. You must have Node.js installed. But in this tutorial, we don't need Node because we are using the CDN version of it. Look at that line 8 and 9. Lines 8 and 9 represents the CDN version. So even without installing Node.js on your application, you can use this to write React application, right? So without installing Node.js on your laptop, rather, you can use those lines 8 and 9 to build React application, which is, you know, when you want to prototype, you want to test, but a full featured application, you are encouraged to install Node.js and then use npm to install your React or your Next.js, which we'll still look at today. So, but let's just move on and see how all those DOM manipulation we did last week, how React now helps us to reduce all those boilerplate code to giving us a good user experience. All right, so we've introduced the React into our application, right, at point 8 and 9, and then we can now gradually do, you know, call some basic functions from those frameworks that we've imported into our code. So inside our script, so let's comment out all this. So inside our script, we're still going to, well, of course, we're still going to make use of get element by ID, which is the only time you're going to be using get element by ID. In React, the only time you're going to be using get element by ID, which you're not even aware of when you install React using the normal, you know, the normal step that I just showed now. You're not even aware of that behind the scene you are using get element by ID, right? But yeah, we're doing it here just to let us know that that is how it works behind the scene. So we can now do const. So we have this up. Let me bring this, or let me comment this out so see the amount of codes we needed to write to generate that simple thing. So let me bring this here, introducing React. Let's call this introducing React. So we still need this line. We still need to get the ID from our UI, which is already here. That's done. Then we now call const. What is the root element? Const root equals. So the React DOM framework, the React DOM library exposes React DOM. There's a React DOM class, so that we can use to create root elements. So we can now pass in our app here. Then we can now render. So root, we can now say root.render our h1. So I'm going to introduce something here. I'm going to introduce our h1 tag. like we did here, but in this case, we are not creating. So let's do, now let's test something first. So React is going to tell us something is going on. So H1, put this H1, close this H1. So now look at line 28, which is what we already know what that means. But line 29, now we have access to React DOM because again, we have imported React framework as CDN or from a CDN into this particular page, right? So because of that, I can make use of React DOM here in line 29. Can you see? So it says React DOM.create root. So and what is the root element? The root element is actually our div element here. So that's the element we are targeting. Take note, app is just an ID, can be anything. You can put any name here, but whatever name you have here, make sure it's the name you are referencing at this point. So, but I guess by convention, React, in the React world, like using app, because in between this tag, that's where your app will be displayed, will be embedded. So they call it app, right, as the ID. So now we are having so in line 31 it says root.render, but let's see the output of this. We are going to have an error, but we are learning all this so as to understand what is going on. So we are going to run this again, console. So look at it, says uncut syntax error, expression got this in line 31. Let's see index of HTML line 31. Let's see line 31. Now you know what is going on here. Remember I mentioned something about JavaScript world or JavaScript land and HTML land the other time. So somebody could have asked, why is this not HTML? Is this not HTML? Why? How come we are embedding HTML at this point? So that is the error that this thing is giving to us. It's telling us, okay, I really do not understand what you are doing here. You have introduced HTML here, but I'm actually inside, JavaScript land, right? This is JavaScript land. So it is because there's something called JSX. JSX. Let's look at JSX. JSX. JavaScript. So JSX is a syntax extension to JavaScript that allows you to write HTML-like structures within your JavaScript code. So in our source code, we've only introduced React and React DOM. So there is no way JavaScript engine can interpret this. So we now need to introduce the JSX library for JavaScript engine to interpret this and then render whatever it is we have here. So, and which is also inside we're going to put that inside our header. Look at that line 10. See, it's also a source file hosted in a CDN. It's called unpacking.com. So you can see babel.main.js. Babel is what helps us to interpret HTML-like elements as if they are JavaScript. It's called JSX. That means we are writing HTML inside JavaScript, right? I should tell the browser that this is JXX. Okay, so let's now inform the browser that this text is JSX. Let's see what happens here. JSX. Yep, so you can see it is being rendered in the front end. So now we can see the importance of the type here. So because we've introduced this particular library to interpret our HTML within JavaScript, we must tell the rendering engine that, okay, this is no longer pure JavaScript. It is now what? JSX. That means an extension of JavaScript. And that's what enables us to render this HTML that is embedded here. But you can see that VS Code is not really highlighting this. I guess VS Code is not seeing all this as pure JavaScript. So that's why it's not giving all the color and everything. But this is valid JSX syntax. And that's why we are having this output being rendered for us. So now we have gradually introduced JavaScript into our initial markup. So let's learn something now. Initially, we wrote how many lines? Lines 20. Let me bring this down here. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to achieve this same display compared to lines 1, 2, 3. Which one is shorter? So obviously, now there is no point. In fact, at some point, by the time we start writing, React, functional React application, we are not even bothered about line 29. In fact, we're not even bothered about line 31. What we're bothered about is how we are rendering this by using a JavaScript function. So React actually reduces the number of code we write. Imagine here we have to get element by ID, we have to create an element H1, we have to do inner HTML, we have to do append child and all that. React handles all that for you. You can see, look at this single line, root.render, H1, automatically behind the scene, React is creating the H1 tag, appending all this to it, creating a root element, appending this to the root element. Everything that we've done here behind the scene, React has handled all that for us. So that is the beauty of frameworks. With framework, you don't need to bother yourself with writing so much codes. They want you to focus on the logic of your application. Focus on the logic. What do you want to implement? What do you want to achieve? What is the business, the business logic that you are working on? Leave all the UIs, leave all this display, all this get element, create node, create that, append child to us. We can handle all that for you, but focus on implementing the logic of your application. So that is the importance of having React or using frameworks to build applications. So let's now introduce some basic concepts of React, like components, like props, and all that. So this now take us to writing functions, right? Somebody's asking, is there a limit to the number of routes you could create? So in this case, we have just one root element, right? The root element is this div where we are displaying our application. So if you want another root element to be displayed here, then you can do that. So that means you now need to get the element by whatever the ID is, then now render to that particular ID right here. So there's no limit. You can have multiple. So here now I've just duplicated the application twice. If you look at here, this should give us two of those. Welcome to JavaScript framework. Is this not the right one? Anyways, yeah, there is no limit to the number of routes you can create. So as long as you have an ID, whatever the name of this ID is, if I give it a different name, maybe app2, so you want to align those app, one after the other, then you must now get element by ID app2 and then create a route for that app2 and then render to that particular app, right? So that's what I just did here. Somebody's asking us to do a recap, just joining. Yeah, so again, so as not to pull us back, right? The video is going to be available. It's going to be on YouTube, so you can go back and watch the YouTube. But basically what we did was that we started by using pure JavaScript to render something to the front end, right? We use pure JavaScript, no React at all, to render an H1 element here. And then we now tested, we now tried using, we now introduced React by importing these 3 lines. Actually, these 2 lines first, line 8 and line 9. Then line 10 is just a utility framework to help us convert HTML to write HTML within JavaScript. So those 3 lines will help you to do this, to render the same thing on the front end. And we saw that this is simpler, this is quicker. We don't need to start creating HTML DOM elements. We don't need to start appending to child anymore. With this JavaScript, it's like you're writing HTML straight on within your JavaScript, and everything is being rendered in the front end. Very simple, very simple. So that's what we've done. So let's now create, so we can do away with this. Let's remove all this, since we're now dealing with JavaScript, dealing with React. So we're still having the same display here. So we have, so what are components? Components in JavaScript, in React. Like we said the other time from our slides, React helps us to create reusable components that can display on the user interface, right? And React components are basically JavaScript functions. So every time you create a React component, you are creating a JavaScript function. So for example, I can do something like this. Let me put this one, let me move this here at the top, then leave all these ones at the bottom, and then create a function. So function, forget the fact that VS Code is not highlighting our source code. It is because we are now in JSX, and most likely I don't have a JSX extension to give me highlighting here. But by the time we start developing React and Next.js application proper, we don't need to bother ourselves with all this. So let's say function header. Now we're creating React components now, right? So inside this header, inside the header, we want to bring all this. We want to return this. Remember I said a function can return something, or it can also be a void function. So return this. We can decide to put this here if you wish. Then, because this is now a function, it's not a React component, we can make reference to the component as if it's HTML. So inside my render function, I can do this head as if you are writing HTML tags. I can close this. There's one option, or I can, it's named header, so be careful. If not, it will not, it's going to give you errors. It's named header. Or I can even decide to do this, especially if I want to embed children to it. So whichever way, it's still going to work. Can you see? So, but let's see the markup now. Let's inspect. You can see inside our div tag, we're only seeing H1, right? Inside our div, we're only seeing H1 with the content. But our source code, we've actually created a function. This function returns a JSX. Remember JSX? We're writing HTML inside JavaScript. So it's called JSX. So we are returning a JSX, and then we are calling this function as if it's an HTML tag. So this allows you to create multiple components with React. So any function you create, let's say another function, let's say header 2. Let's just put something here to differentiate, right? And then I can do, I can return this is header 2. Let's do home, another function again. Let's say this is home. So inside home, I can return a div element. Just take note. I can return a div element, div, close this, open, close div. Remember, I must close. They are valid HTML tags, right? So I can return header, all this. This is header. Because I don't have any content, let me use the self-closing type, and then header 2. So this is header, or let me name it header 2. So yeah, so we must now call home, since home is now housing those two. So let's just do home here. Remove all this and all that. So you can see 2 divs have been displayed for us. The first one is, so these are called this is a valid React component, another React component, then put together by a third React component, which returns a div, and then the two other components. The first one is header, the other one is header 2. And take note, React components are case sensitive, so you don't use lower case or lowercase letters for React components. You use uppercase letters for React components. Take note of that. There is a chart. Let me check. It says, please, is it VSC you are using? Yes, VS Code. So look at this. So this function is a React component, another React component, another React component again. But what I'm just doing in this third one, which I'm calling home, is just to call this and this together. Like I'm bringing them together, header and header 2, again being housed by a div tag. So if you look at our source, you see what just happened now. So here, you now see a div. The first one is, this is the outer one. These are the other 2 components inside the div. So this is one and this is the other one. So there are 2 components inside a particular div. So this is the div. There are 2 components. This component 1, this another component 2, or which is named header 2 here inside that div. Right? So that is how you create React components. You create React components by using normal JavaScript functions, but make sure they are not, you don't use lowercase for them. Camel case, you can use camel case, but make sure the first letter is uppercase. It's like as if you are creating a class in JavaScript, in C# or in Java or something. So you use uppercase letter for the first letter, and then all the other ones can be camel case. You can see the way I did it here. H is capital, T is capital, and so on and so forth. It's just a convention, but the first letter must be capital for it to render as a React component. So take note. You can also next component, which is I just demoed now. You can next different components together, which is what I just did. So I have a div here, right? So inside this div, in fact, I can even remove this, return this div. So bring this down, this is called nesting. I just nested this, right? So let's put this here. Let's make sure we're having a valid JavaScript GSS code. So you can see, so div, this is header, this is another header too. So these are two different components nested inside a component called home. So down here, I just called home alone, and then it's displaying for us what we're having here, right? So take note of that. So let's now move on to creating. How do we display data? How do we display data in React? So we display data in React using props, right? Using props or properties. That's the short form for props. I wonder why they're calling it props. Why not just call it properties? Anyways, so remember in HTML, ID is an attribute, right? I can add some other attributes like class equals something, right? So in the world of JavaScript, when you want to extend the functionality of a class, and of course there are no default there are no default attributes for those extensions you want to use. You introduce what is called props or properties. You introduce what is called props or properties, right? For example, if I want to display this title, say, let me remove this. I don't need this. So assuming I want to display something here, this JavaScript file has a, where is it again? I want to add a title here. Let's say title equals whatever title I want to give to it. Let's say welcome to React. Or even if I bring, let's say I bring this title here, right? So welcome to JavaScript and React framework. So I'm already passing this title to this header. So I really do not have to hard code this at this point, right? So this is just normal JavaScript. What do? You add function parameters. So there should be a function parameter called title at this point. But how do we make use of it in React? So they are called props. They are called what? Props or properties in short. They are called props. So if header, look at this line 32. Header has an attribute, like a user-defined attribute called title. They're actually, in the world of React, we call them props. So how do we now make reference to it so that it gets displayed at this point, right? So again, there's something called props again, yeah. So I can destructure the prop here. So there are two ways. Let's start by destructuring it here, object destructuring, and then making use of it at this point. In fact, we can even console log whatever is here. But let's see. Let's display this. So are we still having the same? Yep. Are there bugs in our code? Nope. So let me take away this. Let's just keep working with one file. So take away this. So I'm having just one of it. Let me bring this here so it refreshes. We can see what we're doing at the same time. Okay, so look at line. So what we just did here is called properties. Yes, it's gonna be on YouTube. It's gonna be on YouTube. All right, so we're displaying using React components, right? But now we're introducing. You can see how we introduce a property to the function, to this React component called title. Actually, behind the scene, there's a props property here, right? Called props in React. Now, it's going to give us error because it doesn't know what title is. Doesn't know what title is at that point. So for me to, so this title, let's even console log title first. Let's comment this out. Let's console log props. Console dot log. You see that props is an object in, let's view console. Where is it? Source map error network. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm returning this. Before return, okay, let's just leave this one here since I'm returning this because it is the only object I'm returning to the user interface. Uncut reference error, title is not defined. Oh, yeah. So to be props dot title, but I'll explain all this to us. Just hold on. So now look at line. Yeah, this is the console log I wanted to print. So line 22, console log props. You might be wondering, where is this props coming from? Because React expects, or anything you pass to a function are called properties. So for you to access those properties, React has a particular value called props, right? So this props that is here, meaning that, remember, we're adding title equals this. Let's even add another property again. Let's say title, let's say age equals 25. Age equals 25. Now, all the properties that you've added to this React function, can be accessed using props. Can you see? Can be accessed using props. Where again? Oh, sorry. See, this is wrong. 25 should be inside here. So now let's console. If you console log props, look at what is given to us. You can see object. So it's an object of all those properties: age 25, title, welcome to JavaScript. So this is a valid JavaScript object that props represents. So, and how do you make reference? Because they are objects, you can do object dot. Remember when we did when we talked about objects? So object dot the individual property name. So prop is an object. If I want to console log, if I want to view title, I can do this. If I also want to view, let's do props dot age. You can see 25 is appearing here. Can you see? Let me do a break here, normal HTML break. So you can see this is the title, this is the age, right? So the props, these props gives you access to all the properties that you've assigned to that particular HTML component, so that so that you can now reference those props and print them out. So this is verbal. This is in coding, they always try to reduce the number of code you write, right? So instead of writing props.title, props.age, you can actually destructure. In JavaScript, there's something called object destructuring or destructuring. So that means what I'm trying to do here is I want to destructure. Let me do const variable equals, let me do destructuring here. I have title, I have age equals props. So in JavaScript, when normally when we want to declare a variable, we do const a variable name. But if you do const variable name, or variable names, it can be one, it can be multiple, inside curly braces, that means you are telling JavaScript that you want to destructure. I want to pick out all the elements inside these props, assign them individually at the appropriate position. Look at props. Remember, We've locked props in the console. This is object props. Age is 25. Title is welcome to JavaScript and React framework. So this line 26 is telling us that they structure whatever props is into their individual variables. Instead of me creating separate variables, title equals props, normally I could do this. I could do const title equals props.title, that's one. Const age equals props.age, that's two, right? All these are valid JavaScript code, right? So it means at this point, I can now just print out title and what? An age. I believe this should still work. Where is it? Hope I don't have any bug in my code. Let me see. Uncaught syntax error. Identify title. Where is it? Oh, because I've already declared it here. So multiple times. So now, instead of writing line 24 and 25, we can reduce this code by using what is called object destructuring. So line 24 and 25 can be combined into a single line as line 22. Let me uncomment this. So I can now comment this and comment this. So line 22 is called object destructuring. Whatever objects we have here will be assigned to these individual properties and they will be valid JavaScript variables. And look at, we are now making use of these variables at this point. Now you might be wondering why we're using curly braces here. If you don't use curly braces, let me take away this curly brace here. Let's see the error we're going to get. It's fine. It's not even error. It's rendering title as what? As pure text. Remember what we said about JavaScript, about React world, or being inside HTML world. Inside this place, remember this is HTML that we are writing inside JavaScript with the help of Babel. So this is JSX. But it will see this as just a normal text. So it's going to write out whatever text we have here, title. But we want to retain it as a variable. So use curly braces to retain, to bring in that particular field as a variable. That's why we are adding curly braces here. So don't be confused. The curly braces here and the curly braces here have different meanings. So take note. The curly braces at line 22 is JavaScript object destructuring. But the curly braces at line 29 is here. I'm inside HTML or JSX, but I want to bring in a JavaScript variable. So I need curly brace to do that as well. So I know it's confusing, but as you keep programming, you understand all these, little features of React or JavaScript generally. So at this point, these curly braces, we are destructuring whatever is here as objects as variables. And then at this point, we're telling this JSX, this HTML here that, okay, we want to bring in a JavaScript variable. So consider this as a variable, not just an ordinary text. So that's why the content of that variable is being displayed for us here. Because if I take curly brace away from age, see what will happen. It's going to display age here for us, but we don't want age as a text. We need the value of age, so we must introduce curly braces as well here. That's one way. Then we also talked about what is it again? Last week we talked about template literals. So you can also use template literals to display whatever you have here. So that's basically how to create components in React. So use functions to create those components, and then you can now render those functions in the user interface. All right. So I think we can stop here for today, and then next week we'll now see how to create a proper Next.js or React application, not going through all this. So all this we are doing is just to introduce us to the world of frameworks, how frameworks work, and how they help us to do away with all those boilerplate codes of writing, get element by ID, create node, and create all that using so just using React components or React or JavaScript functions. We can use we can write less code to give. Imagine having to do all this using pure JavaScript. I tell you, the code is really going to be long. Like you could literally write 100 lines of code to do all this. Well, maybe not 100. You could, yeah, maybe let's say 50, 70 lines of code to do all these things that we have done here. So that's why you need to learn a framework. Yeah, we've covered a lot today. So next week we'll now know how to install. No, today what we did was to import your React and Babel from CDN links, right? But the ideal way to do it is to do npm install to install them within your your within your folder using npm node package manager npm. So for example, assuming I want to install where is it, terminal. So yes, I'm using iTerm, so it's asking me to update. So now you use npm, so you can say npm run dev is to run the dev version and all that. So next week we'll talk about how to use npm to install Next.js, and then we'll talk about um, the basic concepts of Next.js, which makes it even better than React.js, and then we'll start working on projects. All right, thank you very much, guys. Again, I'm going to push this also to the GitHub. The source code from our last class is already on GitHub, like I said. You can go back and view them again to know how we implemented the edit button and the delete and the edit button. So yeah, next week, like I said, we're not going to do all this, but just what we did today was just to introduce us to how frameworks work. So we'll just go straight to using create React app or create Next app to install our application.